Welcome to Vlog 1, Skills versus Capacities in the Weights Room. A skill limitation can be described as a motor skill dysfunction with respect to poor familiarity of the movement or a previous capacity limitation. So a capacity limitation can be defined as an underlying limitation in terms of stability, mobility, strength, or power. In this vlog, we'll be looking at two exercises, the back squat first and then the barbell overhead press. We will watch the participants performing the exercise. An exercise analysis will then be conducted. We will then perform assessments to decide whether the participant has a skill or capacity limitation. Then corrective exercises or exercise alternatives will be given. First up, we have athlete 1 performing the back squat. He is a 55-year-old male who is a recreational runner and used to play Sunday league football. He has a slight shoulder impingement and has been diagnosed with mild arthritis. As you can see from this video, the athlete is performing the squat with a plastic dowel stick instead of a barbell. Straight away, we came across a capacity issue as the athlete was unable to hold the barbell on their back, so we investigated this further. To assess the problem, I asked the athlete to perform some wall slides. He was seriously restricted in his shoulder external rotation, the right side being much worse than the left. Even standing away from the wall, he couldn't get his right hand to touch the wall, hence being unable to get his arm into an externally rotated position to hold the barbell. This suggests that there is a weakness in the teres minor and the infraspinatus of the rotator cuff muscles. To strengthen and mobilize around the shoulder joint, I got the athlete to perform the following exercises. Single arm banded external rotations, banded external rotations at 90 degrees abduction, some double-armed banded external rotations, and stick external rotations. If we go back to the squat analysis, we can quite clearly see that the athlete's bar doesn't travel through their base of support. The bar has a forward trajectory. In addition, the athlete is unable to get a good depth into their squat, as their knee flexion is more than 90 degrees. When we watch from the posterior angle, as the athlete gets near the bottom of their squat, they lift the heel of their left foot. If you look further, they shift their weight into their right leg, and there is a lateral hip shift to the right. Interestingly, if you look at the athlete's stance, the right foot is more turned out than the left. In the squat, the athlete's knees didn't travel past their toes, so first up we assessed ankle dorsiflexion mobility by using the half-kneeling knee-to-wall test. The left ankle performed worse than the right, however neither reached 5 inches, which is deemed to be normal. That is 12.7 centimetres. Therefore, we can say that limited ankle dorsiflexion is a capacity limitation. To try and improve this, I got the athlete to perform some banded ankle dorsiflexion mobility exercises. We also found that the athlete had extremely tight calves due to his running, so it may be beneficial to foam roll or perform some myofascial release on. Next up, we assessed hip internal rotation. A normal hip internal rotation is between 30 and 40 degrees. Athlete 1 scored much less than this, and again the left performing worse than the right. We then did the same for hip external rotation. A normal score is between 40 to 60 degrees. Athlete 1 scored much less than this, and again the left performing worse than the right. To address these issues, I gave athlete 1 the following exercises. Seated pigeon pose with a slight forwards lean, 90-90 stretches, and the foam roller to release the glutes and piriformis. While doing these, he found he had some trigger points, which suggest that his glutes are extremely tight. With athlete 1, we practiced squatting to a bench to get to a 90-degree knee flexion angle. With this athlete, I would not prescribe back squats due to the capacity limitation with his shoulder. Instead, I would prescribe goblet squats or front squats. In addition to improving his mobility, I would also recommend some exercises to help with the lateral hip shift. Some tempo rear foot elevated split squats, single leg hip thrusts, glute bridges, and reactive neuromuscular squats. Next up is athlete 2. He's a 31-year-old male, again a recreational runner and cyclist, and he has no previous injuries. Here is athlete A performing a back squat. Instantly you can see the athlete shifts their weight forwards into the balls of their feet, causing the heels to raise excessively off the ground. It's very obvious here that there is a skill issue. However, we are unsure if there are any underlying capacity issues. The orange line would be the optimal bar trajectory going through the base of support. However, the forwards lean and heel raise causes the bar to have a forwards trajectory. When we watch the squat from the anterior plane, we can see that there is knee valgus, that is, that the knees are collapsing in. The optimal technique model will suggest that the knees should track forwards over the toes. As the heels raise excessively off the floor, the first test was to see if there was a lack of ankle dorsiflexion. The weight-bearing lunge test was used. The athlete had acceptable dorsiflexion and it was concluded that this was not a capacity issue. I then got the athlete to perform a pole squat to reinforce sitting back into the heels while holding onto the pole for support. From this, I also analysed if they had any hip mobility issues. The athlete was able to keep their heels on the floor and get into a good squat depth without any spinal lumbar flexion. I weighed the pole for support and got the athlete to perform a goblet squat to a bench, again to reinforce sitting back and keeping the heels on the floor while maintaining a nice upright posture. To tackle knee valgus, I got the athlete to put a mini band on around their legs and under their knees. I gave him cues to keep the knees pushed out and keep the tension in the band. If the knees collapsed in, the band would lose tension. Watch the athlete perform the banded bodyweight squats from the sagittal plane, we can see that the athlete has responded well to the cues given. We can confidently say that this athlete had a skill issue and not a capacity issue. To assess our progress, I gave the athlete the bar again and asked him to perform the squat. The first 2 reps showed a slight heel lift, but a significant improvement from the start, and also a slight forwards bar trajectory. I then stopped the athlete and reminded him of our cues. He then showed significant improvements. This video shows a comparison of the first squat I asked the athlete to perform and then the last. Here we have athlete 1 performing a barbell overhead press. As you can see, the movement is being performed poorly. The athlete is looking up at the bar and extending their lumbar spine. We performed a shoulder flexion assessment. Both the left and the right arm performed well, showing that he did not have a capacity limitation. Therefore, it must be a skill limitation. Next up, I demonstrated to the athlete what a barbell press should look like. I then gave him the following cues. Don't look at the bar, look forwards. Your hands should be just slightly wider than your shoulders. Finish with the bar directly overhead and push your head through your arms at the top of the press. You should be standing up tall, don't lean back. Squeeze your quads and glutes at the top of the press and keep your core engaged. Don't let your rib cage flare out. As you can see, the athlete responded well to these cues. It was interesting to see that his earlier capacity limitation of external rotation of the shoulder did not limit him in the overhead press. Here we have athlete 2 performing the barbell overhead press. As he presses the barbell overhead, he is unable to achieve full shoulder flexion. As a result, the bar doesn't finish directly overhead. To try and achieve this position, there are compensatory mechanisms occurring that lie outside of the optimal technical model. When we analysed from an anterior and posterior view, we saw that the left arm was leading slightly, causing an unlevelled position. This would suggest that there is a lack of mobility or weakness in the right arm. To make sure the athlete didn't have a skill issue, I first gave him cues to push the bar directly overhead and to push his head through his arms at the top of the movement. As the athlete tries to do this, the compensatory mechanisms are exaggerated. As you can see, the ribs are flaring out and the lumbar spine is extending as the athlete tries to reach the desired position. Optimal shoulder flexion is 180 degrees. The left arm reached 174.8 degrees and the right arm achieved 159 degrees. First up, I got the athlete to perform some wall slides. As you can see, the right arm is unable to reach up as high as the left. This may be due to some tightness in the pecs and the lats. Here are some mobility exercises I recommend for the athlete. Banded lat stretches, myofascial release on the foam roller, preacher stretch, and active range mobility. In summary, I found that skill limitations are quicker to fix and you can see a noticeable difference after a short period. Capacity limitations, on the other hand, can take a while to fix and have to be worked on frequently to see results. It is possible to have a skill and a capacity limitation. I think it is important to address skill limitations first and then see if the athlete has any underlying capacity limitations once they know how to perform the exercise